to make today. Get a clean recording. And thank you, Bianca, for letting me know. Fully understand. Okay, welcome everybody. Um, this is my free masterclass called Mastering Difficult Conversations. No worries, Amy. Amy's just said she has to leave her camera off. For those of you that aren't able to use your camera, I really, really encourage you to use the chat box as much as you can. And even though I'm facilitating everything, I will try and get to any questions you have as we move along. But also, please feel free to jump off mute and ask any questions. I suspect, got a small group this morning. We've got over 30 people registered for today, but I know things crop up. So let's get the session underway. So we've got some people jumping in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So let me start off by doing an acknowledgement of country. Whilst I do this, I really invite you to just really take some beautiful deep breaths and let the words immerse within you and, really use this as an opportunity of getting yourself nice and grounded. So today, I come to you from Darawal country, home of the Darawal people, the traditional custodians of this land, and I pay deep respect to their elders, past and present, and to the stories, wisdom, and connections that continue to live through this country. We gather today from many places, different skies and communities, each of us carrying threads of where we come from. As we meet today, may we listen with our whole being and may we hold this space for more than one way of knowing. And may we remember that learning is not just about content, it's about connection. So if you could just pop in the chat box where you're coming from, that would be a really great start. The country that you're coming in from and also your service name, just so that we get a sense of where people are from, where they're coming in from this morning. I think we predominantly got people coming in from New South Wales, but I have a feeling we have a few people from Basque service, which I think some of those services are in Queensland. So if you could pop that. Oh, we've got Laura from Houston, Texas. My word. Lovely to have you here. I'd love to know how you heard about me over here in Australia. It's lovely you're here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Keep them coming in if you can. Okay, we've got one person from Queensland, one person from Victoria. Okay, keep that in coming. New South Wales, beautiful. So we're coming in from all over the world today, which is beautiful. And it's lovely to have our American friends with us here today. So welcome. So before I launch in to the content, I just want to quickly introduce myself for those of you that don't know me. My name's Sarah Moore, and I am the CEO at Early Educational Leadership, which is a small training and coaching organisation that works with predominantly leaders, but I do work with people's teams and have done, as I say, for over a decade. And I have a particular passion around the neuroscience of communication, as well as coaching. And I've been using what I'm going to share with you today for probably about 8 years. And I've seen significant, and I say significant, very deliberately, shifts and changes in leaders who use the tools that I work with. And today, our major focus is on mastering difficult conversations, but all of the content that I share relates to all of our communication. And obviously, we want to try and avoid even getting to the place where we have to have difficult conversations. So, a lot of what I'm sharing with you today helps our culture in our services communicate in ways where we're communicating from a place of higher trust. And I'm going to talk about why this is so important. And the other thing I want to share with you is that, and I've been told this many, many times, is that a lot of the conversation intelligence tools that I'm going to share with you today and approaches feel fundamentally right. For you as leaders, they feel fundamentally right. And it's often that we have these beliefs in our systems that tell us that we should be a particular type of leader and we need to communicate in a particular type of way. And so, what I'm going to do today is I'm probably going to remind you of some things you know within your body feels right. And it can be a real coming home for you as leaders and a real way of anchoring in who your identity is as a leader, and then just finding the right words and the right approach that is aligned to your values and your philosophy in early education. So quickly pop in the chat box what your role is. Like, tell me, I know we've got some educational leaders with us. We've got pedagogy um, leaders with us. We've got quite a lot of directors in services. I know we have a teacher amongst us. So just pop in the chat box what your role is. How are you coming in? We've got Kate, who's head of school. Awesome. We've got nominated supervisor and director, an early educational leader. So keep those coming in. Just it's really helpful to know what perspective you're coming in from. So everybody so far that's shared in the chat box, part of your role is to have conversations which may move people into a place of distrust for whatever reason. And I know for all of you that you see professional conversations are needed to be had, and some of those can be a bit tricky. So I just really congratulate you for carving out some time today. And I know you're all so incredibly busy. So I just really want to acknowledge you taking this time out to talk about this really important topic. And as I said, I want to maybe, not for all of you, but for some of you, I want to home in on specific skills around how to approach difficult conversations. But I also want you to think about how difficult conversations fit in the context of your role, and your overall communication as a leader, because this is really, really important. And I'm going to talk a little bit moving forward about some work we've been doing with a project called the Dandelion Project, where we've been working with educational leaders around upskilling them so they can have really powerful mentoring conversations. And some of those mentoring conversations I know can be a bit tricky at times. So we're going to share more about that as we move forward. Okay, so do any of these on my slide sound familiar to you? When you're thinking about having difficult conversations, I want you to think about, do you feel like sometimes you might lose sleep over having them? Um, and you might put them off a bit at times, or you're someone who jumps in and says whatever you think, just get it over with. It's like, I've got to have this conversation and I've got to have it really, really fast because it's just feeling so uncomfortable. Um, are you somebody who needs to really think and prepare beforehand? And you might find yourself keep coming back and thinking, I'm going to prepare, but you don't get ready for it and keep putting it off. Um, and you're someone who says maybe let's talk about something else as a way of just starting the conversation off and really just to get the edge off the conversation. So I'm just curious if you've nodded at any of these. I just really want to let you know that you're in the right place. But you share in your language, in your words, um, some of the reasons why you might avoid difficult conversations or put them off. Just pop them in the chat box. So I can't say 5001356 4. If you pop your name in the chat box, I'll change your number. Who's a director, teacher, nominated supervisor, unqualified medical consultant, mentor, all-round problem solver, and comedy facilitator. Awesome. And you're saying you're nodding, especially around procrastinating. Share your name and I'll pop that in so we can actually Amanda. Hi Amanda. Let's quickly do that while you're popping your responses in. And the same with DP staff. It would be lovely to know your name and then I'll change yours too. So Kate said, when you know the receiver of the message is completely overloaded and stressed. That's a good one, Kate. And I think that's probably a fairly common one. Indu, okay, let's change your name there. Beautiful, thank you. Let's hear from some others of you. So I think it's really important to just check in as to what we currently do to really recognize the behavior within ourselves, to start gaining a bit of understanding around what's happening with us internally. Um, because the better we know ourselves, the more we can work at changing some of the responses or the behaviors that we want to. So this is always a really good place to start. So here's what many leaders are quietly wondering. Often this is what I hear from people. They say, why do I avoid conversations I know that need to happen? Does this mean I'm a poor leader? People often say to me, I'm not good at difficult conversations. I always say to them, I don't think anybody thinks they're particularly good at them. Why do I feel anxious for days before having a difficult conversation? And why does it never go the way I planned? Like I planned it all and the words just didn't come out of my mouth. How do I raise hard things without damaging the relationship? And that really links, I think, with what you're sharing there, Amanda. I have a great fear of upsetting people or them being mad at me. And when I do have the difficult conversation, most of the time the results work things out well. And people are not inherently bad and they may be dealing with lots of stuff. Amanda, that's a great share. And you put in a lot there that I think is really important to just for all of us to reflect on. Um, a lot of my work, I can honestly say one of the biggest things that does get in the way is people have really long-term relationships with a lot of people that they're working with, and they really don't want to damage the relationship. They're really concerned about how they're perceived if they say things and they don't land well. And I love, Amanda, that obviously the results that you're creating mean that you're having good, difficult conversations, but that doesn't mean to say that you might not have lots of self-doubt and some of the things that we said about sleepless nights and a lot of energy goes into, just trying to manage even the thoughts of having these difficult conversations. And we're going to talk more about that as we move forward. Um, we have concerns about what to do when the other person shuts down or gets defensive, which often people do if they feel they're being criticized or judged in any way. Um, so if you've ever asked yourself any of those questions that are up on that slide, I want you to feel something, a real shift within you right now because you're in a room full of people who are asking those exact same questions. It's not just about you, it's something that is incredibly common. I think, if not all leaders feel it at some way or another. So by the end of our session today, you're going to understand the answers to some of these in a way that might genuinely surprise you because there's good reasons why we feel these things. This is not about there being a deficit in you as a leader in any way at all. I think actually quite the opposite. I think it's because, and Amanda shared this, and this is what I hear, is you care deeply about what you do and the people that you work with. And as human beings, we're built for connection. And we will go to extreme levels not to create a disconnection from the people that we respect and we care for. And that's something that is really important for us to think about. So My promise to you today is to really acknowledge you're here because you care about your team, about the children in your service, and about you growing as a leader. They're all things that you really, really care about. And that takes courage, and that matters. And I really want to acknowledge you for that because there is so much going on in the sector at the moment, as there always is. Um, and it's really easy for us to question our abilities and just question whether we're up to all the work that you're having to do or the change you're having to manage. So I really want to start off by acknowledging each and every one of you. And my promise to you is by the end of our time together today, you're going to understand why you're not the only person who finds difficult conversations uncomfortable. And you can look at that from your own perspective, but also your team's perspective as well, why they find difficult conversations uncomfortable. You're going to increase your awareness about what happens within you from a neurological perspective. And you'll have a few practical tools to help you prepare for and navigate difficult conversations. So I'm going to really give you some things for you to think about and practice moving forward. Um, and what I want to land with, it's easier than you think. And today is your very first step into this. So be very gentle with yourself, and everything that I do, all my work, I say consistently, don't um, dismiss simplicity. Um, because people come often to my sessions and they want, the one, two, three clear strategies that tell me exactly how to do this. And unfortunately, I don't think that exists because conversations are complex, relationships are complex, and there's more happening than just the difficult conversation you're having. You have relationships with the people that you're having difficult conversations in an environment, in a culture that you as leaders are shaping in every conversation you have. You shape the culture of the service that you work in. And so this is why I really want you to think about your communication more broadly, as well as just within the context of difficult conversations moving forward. So what you're going to learn through me this morning is you're going to learn why avoiding difficult conversations is actually a natural brain response, and how to work with your natural brain response. As I said, and I'm going to keep saying it, there's nothing wrong with you. To avoid a difficult conversation is a human natural response that we all have. You're going to look at the how, what conversational intelligence tells us about trust, threat, and communication. You're going to learn practical tools for preparing yourself for a difficult conversation and how to transform moments of tension into opportunities for genuine connection and growth. And I'm going to, towards the end, share a little bit about if this is something that interests you as a leader and you're wanting to upskill your communication and mentoring skills, as something that you're wanting to focus on for a period of time, not in isolation, but with a group of other leaders. That's something that I do, and something that consistently, we just wrapped up one dandelion project today, this week. And one of the consistent things that we've heard from the participants is the sense of isolation educational leaders and leaders feel around their role and how they navigate their communication and how they navigate some of the tricky conversations that they inevitably need to have in the context of their roles. So, before I move on, does anyone have any questions or feedback? And if you don't, can you just give me the thumbs up in the chat box? Please feel free to come off mute. If you've just joined us, please feel free to turn your camera on. It's a shame that we've got no one with cameras on today, but I appreciate you've got things going on, but please feel free to turn your camera on. As I said, pop in the chat box if you're happy for me to move on, a thumbs up or a Y for yes, If not, pop in a question. Um, Brilliant. So I'm hoping to garner some courage. Beautiful, Amanda, where you've got it within you. So this is about tapping in with yourself, and I'm sure you will before the end of our session. So it's looking like everybody is wanting me to move forward. Keep popping in the chat box, everybody. So I know that you're still there as well. Um, all good. Okay, so let's just quickly look at something that we often don't look at and talk about, and that is what happens when we don't have the conversations that we need to have. Because I think sometimes we tell ourselves that avoidance is a safe choice, and that by not saying anything, we're keeping the peace, protecting the relationship, and buying ourselves time. But the truth is, avoidance has a real cost. And I've seen this play out in services over and over again with leaders. Relationships can easily become strained, not because of what was said, but because of what was never said. There's a tension that's in the space that isn't actually talked about. The unspoken tension becomes a wall. Growth gets missed. The learning that could have happened for you, for your team member, or for a parent or family member, or for your service, just doesn't happen because you're avoiding the difficult conversation. And collaboration quietly dies when people think, well, sorry, when people feel things are unsaid or unfair, they stop innovating, they pull back and they start to shut down. And it's often where we see people come and talk to me and they say, my team seem really disengaged. And for me, that's a sign often that people are not being able to have the conversations that they need to have. They're not feeling safe enough to share their opinions or share their questions or share their disagreements because the environment doesn't feel safe enough. And in our sector, this hits children too. The impact of this really impacts children as well, because team dysfunction doesn't just stay with a staff team. It flows in through to the classroom. And we know through the neuroscience, emotions are contagious. So if you are feeling stressed or you're feeling disengaged or you're feeling angry about something that you haven't actually talked about, that flows through to the people you're working with, it flows through to the children, it flows through to the families. So, can I invite you to just pause for a moment and think? Just pause for a little minute. Can you think of a time when avoiding a conversation ended up creating more stress than the conversation itself would have? Just pause with that for a moment and hold that thought. Okay, I don't want you necessarily to do anything, just in your mind's eye, think about that. Because most of us, when we really reflect on this, can name several conversations. And that's recognition of what might be happening in your service. And this is really, really important because it's not just the one conversation, it's multiple conversations. And it's not just the one conversation you're not having. Because if you're not having them, the likelihood is other people in your service are not having them as well. Because it shifts avoidance from feeling like this is a safe choice not to have them to understanding what it costs. And it's much bigger than we think it is. Apart from all the obvious things around, if somebody's practice is slipping and then the knock-on effect around that, or if, say, somebody's turning up late consistently, it's not just about that one person, it's about the culture in the service that you as leaders are responsible for either consciously navigating and creating or unconsciously allowing things to happen unattended to. And I think we all know professional conversations are very much part of, your day to day and what you do. So the value of leaning into discomfort. So first of all, what I want to say about having difficult conversations, and people always look at me and go, really, Sarah, is no matter how many skills you develop, and I've been doing this work for a very, very long time, you can't actually remove the discomfort. The discomfort's always going to be there, as I said, because you care and because there's neurological responses that we're going to talk about. Um, but instead of you avoiding in avoidance and you actually approach difficult conversations, you start to create clarity in yourself, but you also start to create clarity in those that you're talking to and other people. Instead of tension, you create connection. And human connection, if we focus on that, is so powerful. Teams work so productively when they feel a sense of connection and safety. And instead of silence, you create collaboration. And I think all of you will agree that's something that we're looking for all of the time. So, it's really important for us to be thinking about conversations when we avoid them, but then when we embrace them, what the actual benefits are. Okay, so what might become possible for you and your team and the children in your care if you became more confident and connected in the way you approach difficult conversations? And I'd love you to pop that in the chat box. You might be thinking, it would reduce so much stress for me. I would feel more, I'd be able to be more authentic as a leader and speak more freely. I'd trust myself more as a leader. Just pop them in the chat box. Just waiting for people to type. And the reason I'm wanting you to do this is because when you're really clear about what might be possible, then you're much more likely to move through the discomfort, as well as the neuroscience that I'm just about to share with you. So Amanda said I would be able to give myself a high five for giving agency to my staff, honoring their strengths, interest, and knowledge. Beautiful, Amanda. Thank you. That's lovely. Come on, it'd be lovely to hear from some others. I'm going to keep moving on because of time, but keep typing if you're typing. It'd be lovely to see what your perspective. If this is something that you've never thought about before, I really encourage you to. This is really, really important because otherwise we're being passive learners. We just like to improve having difficult conversations, but we're not really thinking about what that would give us. So the next slide that I'm sharing with you, what happens in the brain. Before I do, I just want to acknowledge Bianca's just shared to be able to deal with situations quickly and early before they get out of hand and agree with Amanda, focus more on the strengths of the team. Beautiful. That's lovely. And it's just about you finding the approach and then finding some techniques that you can apply. But there's some really key things you can do before you even open your mouth that can really, really change quite a few things. So let's dive into what's happening in the brain. This slide has come from conversation intelligence. Which I studied for 5 years to become an accredited conversation intelligence coach. And if you don't know anything about conversation intelligence and you want to know a little bit more, I'm just going to put that in the chat box. I would definitely recommend, there's a great book that you might be interested in. Intelligence, known as CIQ. Okay, so if you pop that into Google, you'll get some resources coming up. So this slide comes from that. And I think you're going to make so much sense of the things you've probably felt already, but haven't been able to explain. Like you're feeling them in your gut and you're feeling them in your body. But when we actually start to look at the neuroscience, we actually start to understand why. So when we're in a conversation that feels safe, where trust is present, our brains release a neurochemical called oxytocin and dopamine, and I'm sure all of you are familiar with those, but they're good, feel good hormones, neurochemicals. And they literally neurologically open us up. They help us be more curious, creative, and collaborative. And they literally help us expand our capacity to think and connect. But when we have a conversation that triggers a sense of threat, and that threat doesn't have to be physical, it can be emotional, social, or relational, our brain releases cortisol and adrenaline, and those chemicals literally do the opposite. They narrow our thinking and our perspective. So there's science that says, like, you can measure somebody's perspective literally just starts to close down. They can't peripherally see as much around them. They can't interpret on past experiences, history around that person. We're literally operating from much more of a fight flight response. And what it does is it moves us into protect mode before we've even opened our mouths. And we can easily become defensive, rigid, or closed. So what I want you to do is just look at the left side of this slide where it says distrust, and just be aware that, we've got all of these different parts. We've got a brain system that includes, our prefrontal cortex, our neocortex, our limbic brain, um, our amygdala, our primitive brain. We now know that our heart brain is now scientifically proven as a brain, and so is our gut. And very interestingly, and I think this is a really important thing for you to take away from today, is we now have evidence, research that tells us we have more information coming from our heart brain to our prefrontal cortex system up here than the other way round. So what does this mean? This means we have an enormous amount of intelligence coming from our heart to our head. And I know for all of you, you know this is true at some level. There's so many times we use the phrases, that just came from my heart, or that person spoke and I knew that they were talking from their heart. And also your gut. And I know a lot of leaders in early childhood want to lead through their heart space and their gut. But historically, the level of leadership we've had is very much power over bureaucratic style of leadership and communication. And it's not allowed for that more softer relational style of communication. And what I want to share with you, the good news is today, is there is so much evidence that this is saying when we communicate with relational high levels of trust in a much more caring way. And I love some of these shares that you've put around, strengths and interests and knowledge. When we're doing our communication from a strengths-based perspective, we help open up people's brains so that they're moving and we're moving from a much more high trust perspective. And what's interesting in the brain, which you may not be aware of, trust and distrust isn't just a feeling. There's a location in the brain where we either move to a place of trust or we move to a place of distrust. And when we move to a place of distrust, we see behaviors in ourselves around excluding, judging, limiting, withholding, knowing, dictating, and criticizing. And that's us being human. When I feel under threat, I can see myself in those words and those behaviors. And rather than be thinking about you and me and the we, I become much more I-centric because the brain's built to protect us. So it's not just my intention that is happening here in the communication. I'm actually having a neurological response that is moving me. So a really good example is if somebody comes at you, say a family, a parent walks in the room, they're really angry, they're annoyed with you, and you may have some negative past history with them. As soon as you see them, your brain is registering, I don't feel safe, and you're having a neurochemical hit of adrenaline and cortisol, and then it's moving you into protect mode. Now, I know you all know that. Like you can feel that in your body, and we're going to do an experiment in a minute just to prove that. But these are the moments where we have to bring real awareness around what is happening. Because what we want to do is we want to be as much as we possibly can in that regulated oxytocin space where we can see things from other people's perspectives, where our communication is so much more collaborative and in high trust. And when we do that, the other person can feel that neurochemical coming from us, and it helps to build connection with people. So I'm just really curious. Is this interesting? If it's interesting, put a thumbs up, or if anyone's got any questions. Am I validating some of what you're thinking around how you feel about difficult conversations? It would be lovely just to get some feedback. Otherwise, I feel like I'm just talking to myself, and I don't want to be just talking to myself because I know this content very well and I'm wanting to impart it to you in a way that's landing for you and it's relatable for you in terms of your leadership experience. So please come off mute if you've got any questions. Um, or pop them in the chat box. And I'm going to keep moving forward to make sure we can get to cover everything. So, what we're going to do now is we're going to do a little bit of an experiment because everything about conversation intelligence is it's important we embody the concepts, not just take it on as theory, because your body is the greatest teacher. It's telling you, it's communicating with you all the time. But unfortunately, we're often working from a stressed response where we're slightly dysregulated or very dysregulated. No blame, that's the world we're living in, which means we're not optimizing our brains as much as we need to. And there's some really simple things that we can do to help us do that, all of which I know you know, but it's really helpful for us to get this into our bodies to really start becoming aware of what is happening within us and then looking at that feedback loop, which is giving us information. So Amanda said this is really interesting and something I would like to share with my team. Awesome, Amanda. Brilliant. This is so valuable for teams to know about because it's not when we're empowering them to understand what's happening within themselves, but also other people. When people are being defensive or people are being really reactive, we can start to understand where they are on that brain map. And there's no point keep talking to somebody who is really stressed and is really in the distrust mode because they're not even hearing what you're saying. They're filtering it through a lens of protection. There's so many times where we as leaders go, I had this conversation with somebody and they heard it totally differently from me. That's not what I said. And the thing is, you probably didn't, but they didn't hear what you were saying because they were in a dysregulated space. So let's get on to this experiment really, really fast because we're running out of time. So what I want you to do is just ground yourself and for a moment, take yourself back to a difficult conversation. I'm sure you have many. We're not going to stay long in here. What was the things that were being said to you? Just take your brain back to that space. What were the things that were being said? What were the things that you were feeling but that wasn't being said that you might have just been interpreting underneath, like they're really angry with me or they don't like me or they don't think I'm a good enough leader or um, they always attack me or whatever story you're telling yourself. And how were you receiving it in those moments? Did the message land the way you intended in that difficult conversation? Or did you just feel like, oh my gosh, they didn't hear what I said, or they've totally misunderstood me? And most importantly, and this is something I really want you to just check in with, how did that make your body feel? Did you get butterflies in your stomach? Did you suddenly get anxious, or did you find yourself shutting down, or did you withdraw? Okay, just in your mind's eye, think about that. Just lock that into your body right now. Okay, now I want you to just stop thinking about that and imagine I'm walking into your office with a big plate of hot chips and you're starving hungry and all you want is a hot chip. Okay, we're going to change direction. I've just done a little bit of a brain shift for you so that you're not in that horrible place. Now I want you to recall a conversation that felt really good. And I'm sure you have lots of those too. Think about what was happening in those moments? Where were you? What was the context of that conversation? What did you hear? What were the words or the tone that made you feel safe and heard? Maybe the person had their head slightly tilted. Maybe they lowered their voice. Maybe you just felt their energy, that they were being really inclusive with you. What was being said? What was being shared or acknowledged? And lastly, how did it make you feel? Warm, engaged, energized, connected. I always say this is a really good one to imagine you're talking to one of your closest girlfriends. You know, those conversations that could go on for hours and they almost finish your sentences off. And it just feels really good. Okay, so let's have a look what's happening in the brain. In those two conversations that I've just got you to remember, in literally probably less than 30 seconds, I've got you to release neurochemicals in your brain just by recalling those two conversations. Okay? You're not even having them. That's how amazing the body is. It remembers good conversations, it remembers difficult conversations. And this is what I want you to take away from today. Conversations are not just words. They're not just words. They are they create neurochemical reactions within us. We're creating neurochemicals all the time, whether they be good ones or bad ones or a blend of good and bad at the same time. I don't want to dress cortisol and adrenaline as bad, but too much of them is not good for us. And here's the thing I want you just to take away from now is if you have a really difficult conversation with somebody and it really upsets you and you have a real visceral feeling in your body, that real tightening in your gut and your throat dries and your heart races, cortisol can stay in your body for up to 10, 11 hours. So not only did that conversation create a difficult response in you in the here and now, it has a long-lasting impact on the rest of your day. And this is something we need to be aware of as leaders in terms of the work we need to do on ourselves, which I'm going to get to now. Unfortunately, oxytocin and dopamine, they don't last in our bloodstream for as long. So this is we're sort of thinking about for us as leaders, how much cortisol and adrenaline are we inadvertently producing in ourselves and others because we do as leaders in others, or how much oxytocin and cortisol are we generating? And becoming aware, it's like putting on a new pair of glasses because obviously the more environments we create where there is higher trust, the less difficult conversations you're going to be having because people are not going to be as defensive. Their guard's going to be dropped. They're not going to be as protective. So this is really helpful for us to think of as leaders. What do I do that builds trust through my relational leadership versus what do I do that could inadvertently, because I don't think anyone's genuinely trying to make people stressed or move into distrust, but what are the things I'm doing inadvertently that moves staff into protection? Okay, your superpower, and it's so easy, but so hard at the same time. And I've been doing this work for a long time, and I still get dysregulated all the time. Um, is bringing ourselves to a place of self-regulation. Without a doubt, majority of services I now work with are doing this work with children. They all know that children need to be regulated. They spend time educating children around self-regulation. The gap here often is the work that leaders are doing first and foremost around self-regulation themselves. And I say this not lightly because your superpower as a leader is to think about how regulated you are when you're at work. And when you become dysregulated, what you do about it and how you model that to your team. Because here's the thing, there is no way in any given day you're not going to get dysregulated. It's a stressful environment. That's a given. The key here, particularly around difficult conversations, is to go into conversations from a very self-regulated perspective. As you know, when you're in that place, when you're in a self-regulated place, you're coming from a place of trust. You're activating all of those amazing things in the brain that are creating cortisol, so that are creating oxytocin and dopamine. And the other person is also able to feel that from you. If somebody's standing within 10 foot of you, there is an energy exchange that is happening. So before you can lead a conversation of any description, a difficult conversation or a conversation with a staff team, you need to be able to lead yourself first. Because what it does is it reduces stress and emotional reactivity in the moment. It supports clearer thinking and cognitive flexibility. You're able to think better on your feet and have better quality conversations. It encourages empathy and genuine connection from a relational perspective. It strengthens trust building communication and it helps us stay open and curious and influenceable. That means we're able to see things from other people's perspectives much more clearly. And when other people feel heard and understood, their level of dysregulation or defensiveness reduces. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're the bits that we need to have in place so people can hear the messages that we're trying to get across. You understand me. I might have got something wrong, but you understand my struggles. Research shows that mindful breathing for just 60 seconds can significantly reduce cortisol and restore prefrontal cortex. 60 seconds. It literally, and I do this work with leaders. All of the work that I do in all of my programs, we do self-regulation practices so that we start to embed that over and over again into our practice. So it's not just something we do in the moment before a difficult conversation. It's something we build into our practice. We look at what gets in the way. We look at what works and we look at how we model that to our teams. And the last thing I want to just say on the self-regulation, which is your superpower, is it is a well-being strategy for you and your team. And I'm not adding that as an add-on because that is so paramount at the moment with what is happening in the sector. I talk a lot about slow pedagogy in my programs because we can talk about slow pedagogy for children, but we need to start thinking about, for us as leaders, how can we slow ourselves down so that we can really strengthen our relationships with our colleagues and the families that we work with, and be really aware of how we're showing up as leaders. So a couple of questions in the chat box. Amanda said, this is really interesting and something I would like to share with my team. Sorry, I read that. You said, is it asking someone to come to your office for a discussion? Would that put somebody in a place of distrust? Quite possibly. There's a few, this is where I'm saying this, you need to think about the relationship you have with people, the tone of voice you're using, the sense of urgency. So let me play with that for a second, Amanda. If I were you and, I walked into a classroom with a hustle and bustle where I was really, really busy and I said, Amanda, could I just have a quick word with you in my office now? you can straight away hear that that would trigger somebody really, really fast. So this is where I'm saying use your knowledge, but now you've got knowledge around what's actually happening. That would then put somebody in a place of distrust. So then anything that happens beyond that then impacts the way that conversation goes. Whereas you might say, I might come into your classroom and I'm really relaxed. Now, hi, how are you? Did you have a nice weekend? I'm really being relational with my communication. And I go, hi, Amanda, how are you going? Are you good this morning? Hey, when you get a moment, could I just grab you? Could we have a little bit of a chat? Would you be all right just coming into my office? You can feel the shift in energy. It's totally different and it's relational. We're putting the relational thing before the question, which is just a tiny step that is so important in a world where connection is becoming something that is just on the decline. I hope that answers your question. Let me know if it does. So the next thing is to be thinking about, we've thought about our regulation, how regulated, and this is the next step. I'm just giving you a teaser here because we do so much work on all of this within the programs that I run, namely the Dandelion program, which is what I'm wanting to share with you at the end. But we talk about priming yourself for a difficult conversation. We don't leave it to chance. You know, we actually really, as conscious leaders, and I'm all about conscious leadership, we actually get conscious about how do I want this person to feel after our conversation. So it could be I want them to feel supported, I want them to feel heard, I want them to feel valued. Start here before you think about anything about what you'll say. This creates a clear intention. What can I do to help them hear this with an open mind and heart? And it's just something I just shared just now. It's timing, it's tone, it's location, it's your energy, how regulated or dysregulated you are. All of these send signals before you even speak one word. So becoming really, you're planning it, you're being really intentional about it. And how can I set the context for an empathic exchange? So state your intention clearly. Don't assume the other person knows you care. Now, this is just such a powerful thing to do. And it's something without exception I know you can do because I know it's true. In the majority of cases, before you have a difficult conversation, there's one of two things that is often happening. You're feeling nervous and anxious. And you really want the conversation to land. So you start the conversation off by saying something along the lines of, and you need to find your own language for this. I've been thinking about how to have this conversation with you for some time. This is if it's a big conversation. And I've thought about it really carefully because you are, I really care about you, and this conversation really matters. And what you're doing is you're putting right up front the importance of the relationship that you have with somebody. And if you're feeling nervous, say, I'm feeling nervous about having this conversation. Because the interesting thing is the brain's already picking that up before you open your mouth. They're already looking at you going, something's happening here and I'm not sure what's just about to happen, but I'm feeling it. So I'm already starting to move into protect. Where if you say those things, what it actually does is it lowers the level of resistance and actually helps people. They might be in a little bit in between trust and distrust and bracing themselves a little bit. But what it actually does is, I know we're going to be okay. We're going to have this difficult conversation, but we're going to be okay. And that warms you up, it primes you so that then you can launch into the conversation that you need to have. What do you think of that? It would be lovely to hear what you think of that. So I'm just going to quickly move in. We've got 4 minutes, and I just want to have a little bit of time to open up the space if anyone's got any questions or feedback. So we've just finished a program called the Dandelion program, which was, and we've just rechanged it. It was a 10-month program. We've now reduced it down to 6 months, which gives people an opportunity to go through a framework where we work with educational leaders and room leaders and teaching directors who want to build these communication skills, and they are really aware that the relationships that they have with their team and the conversations they have with their team are paramount. And what we do in this program, it's a very practical program. What it does is it teaches you the tools around how to have conversations, some of them more challenging, some of them around just day to day around communication. How for you as leaders to not feel that you have to have all the answers, that you're building a culture within your teams where you're getting people to think for themselves. You're coming from a very different perspective around curiosity and a growth mindset from a really regulated place. We give you tools each month of the program. We give you tools, and then we do practice sessions where you get to work with mentors, you get to work with each other, you get to practice them, and then you get to implement them within your team over a 6 month period. And the really cool thing with this is that, is that you get to spend 2 days in Sydney where we all come together at the beginning of the program, where you get a lot more neuroscience, you get a lot more clear understanding of the brain science behind the models that we've created. And then you walk away with literally a toolkit that enables you to communicate in a very different way to maybe the way you communicate now, or it supports the way you want to communicate and you understand the structures and the brain science underneath it. So, we've run out of time, but what I would love you to do is, if any of what I've shared resonates, and somebody mentioned they'd love their team to get some of this training. I do team training as well. But I'm a great believer that we need as leaders to do the work on ourselves first. We need to invest in our leaders to make sure that we're not just putting room leaders into positions where they are supposed to be having some of these conversations and they don't have the communication skills to have them. And it's not a personal deficit, it's because they haven't had the training behind the communication. So Amanda's just said, you're right, it's difficult to be a leader with all of the burden of policy and procedure, people's emotions, complex situations. I sit in an office on my own and I don't have a teammate. I can make decisions that provide happiness and I'm liked, not when decisions that are necessary. I'm Nigel, no friends. This is hard. And it's the number one thing that came out of our program is exactly what you said, Amanda. People just feeling so isolated. And I don't want that for you or anyone. So I really encourage you to have a look. If you're like, we have a whole 5 step process around how to break down difficult conversations that's part of the program. But wrapping up today, I want to just leave you with, you know, the key takeaways from today. And what you decide to do from this is obviously something I leave with you. We'll be doing some follow up. But the key takeaways I want you to take away from today is avoidance is a natural brain response. It's not a character flaw or a leadership failure. Everybody's brains work roughly the same way. So this is part of the human condition. Neurochemicals shape every conversation. Cortisol closes us down, oxytocin opens us up. What we do in the program is we give you techniques to build oxytocin and to reduce cortisol through your communication and through some of your ways in which you approach communication within your service. You're taking away self-regulation is the first step. You can't lead the conversation until you lead yourself. If that's something that's landed with you and you want to do some more work on that, jump on my website. I've got so many free resources. You can take them away. You can use them with your staff. That is the 101 that I want you really to take from today for your own well-being and sanity, if nothing else. It changes everything. Priming shifts the whole dynamic before you say a single word. So just doing that planning before you have the conversation. And let me tell you, as I wrap up, that difficult conversations done well are your greatest leadership growth opportunity. There's something that if you can move the discomfort into the discomfort and move through it and work with your team to have them, your team trust you more because they know they can have difficult conversations and your relationship is maintained throughout. And we know it's not when you're going to have a difficult conversation, you're going to have them. That's part of your job. So why not get skilled and get the tools to help you have them and take away that discomfort as much as you realistically can. So you've got strategies in your leadership toolkit. So that's it from me. Um, just a little bit of feedback, Laura. So I love the idea of setting the context for an empathic exchange, slowing down and stating your intention. Lovely, Laura. That's a great takeaway. Congratulations for pulling that out. And Amanda said, I have it. It's fantastic. I don't have enough time to do everything. So one thing at a time from your resources is my mission. Beautiful, Amanda. And thank you, everyone, for showing up today and for caring enough to continue your growth. You're doing an amazing job. And I look forward to speaking to you or being in contact with you again if that feels right. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and I will see you around. Take care.